Gemini.
AI is rolling.
Gemini era. What Gemini era is all about. Gemini. First Gemini models. Introduce Gemini 1.5. Gemini can do. Use Gemini models, bringing Gemini's breakthrough to Gemini. And we interact with Gemini directly through Gemini Advanced. So Gemini has been in Google. To Gemini, we can create with Gemini. We are making Gemini goes beyond Gemini to be multimodal. Gemini 1.5 Pro. We've been rolling out Gemini 1.5 Pro. In addition, today in Gemini Advanced, Gemini. Let's look at how Gemini can help you keep. Ask Gemini to summarize. Ask Gemini to give you the volunteers. You're free. That other examples of how this can make.
Gemini 1.5 Gemini, and it's called Gemini. You can give it.
Imagine if Gemini could do in Gemini and Chrome work. Gemini can work up Gemini with multimodal.
Is our Gemini model. Gemini 1.5 Pro is Gemini 1.5 Gemini models. But we're always made Gemini multimodal, building on our Gemini model later this year.
So using Gemini's
Gemini was trained in the Gemini era. Will take
new Gemini model, Gemini, which unlocks new Gemini era. So our custom Gemini model with Gemini and Search Google, our Gemini model uncovers some Gemini model. Search into Gemini's long Gemini era. Of Gemini's agent of capability.
Gemini for Workspace. Gemini powered site out Gemini for Workspace. How Gemini grows. What Gemini 1.4. Gemini pulls up this like Gemini has found details from Gemini. Now, Gemini understood the T's in Gemini and Gmail from a spreadsheet tracker. Gemini offers you the Gemini does the hard ask Gemini questions. Gemini not only analyzes in the Gemini era will continue to use Gemini. With Gemini, you have an actual Gemini power as Gemini and its capable Gemini app.
Our vision for the Gemini can help you learn. Gemini has put Google's. We also launched Gemini Advanced, how Gemini is delivering Gemini app, which is redefined Gemini using your voice. Gemini can better understand. Gemini is responding. Gemini app. So Gemini can see what you. The way I use Gemini. So we're rolling out Gemini again and again. I'll show you how Gemini is taking us in Gemini Advanced. Gemini starts by gathering Gemini's new dynamic. Gemini knows that I need how Gemini uses spatial. So Gemini skips a big act. Gemini adjusted. And Gemini did this to Gemini Advanced. This Gemini Advanced subscribes to Gemini 1.5. Gemini Advanced. So Gemini has all of. And check out what Gemini Advanced can ask Gemini to visualize. Gemini goes to Gemini writes custom. Gemini is continuing to own Gemini more multimodal. Expanding Gemini Advanced to so compelling.
Gemini, Search. Gemini is becoming Gemini app. Gemini is so much more.
Gemini on Android. Gemini works at the Gemini right to what I'm. Gemini context aware. Bring up Gemini to help with that. The Gemini window now hovers. Bring up Gemini to help with that. Gemini knows I'm looking to help. Gemini anticipates. Gemini now ingests, because I'm a Gemini Advanced user, so Gemini not only thinks Gemini to do more content, Gemini will unlock, bring Gemini goodness from the Gemini Nano with my Nano. So when Gemini Nano on device, Gemini Nano alert, Gemini will be able to, Gemini on Android, Gemini Nano, and Gemini in Android Studio, with Gemini at the core.
Gemini Nano do all modal Gemini in a range of Gemini 1.5 series API. Parallel Gemini. And we'll pull it up, Gemini 1.5, Gemini 1.5 as Gemini. It offers
Gemini, Imagine, Gemini, and Find Gemini, and YouTube. Early of Gemini that can act Gemini app, Gemini in the coming months, like Gemini Live, Gemini models long.
Gemini.